Hey guys, this is Brian from FantasyLabs. I am here with Peter Jennings, aka CSU Ram 88, and Colin Davy. In this video, we are going to go over our lineups from the PGA 60K Eagle 3-entry max from the Shell Houston Open. This is a segment we're going to try to do every once in a while here. This is, again, the 3-entry max. So we all threw in 3 lineups. And in this video, we're just going to talk about our lineup choices personally, and then have the other guys break it down as well and give us feedback. So I think it'll be instructive to for us to get feedback from the other guys, but also instructive for you guys just to see our process with lineup making and then what the other guys thought about it. So here I will start, and then we'll look obviously at Pete and Colin's lineups as well. I cashed 2 of my 3 lineups, even though I had 2 missed cuts in the 2 that I cashed. Colin, I'll start with you. Obviously, really rostering Russell Henley is sort of what saved me this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the least objectionable. I mean, like, I thought he was the best value on the board for sure. I thought he was going to be decently chalky. Like, that's about what I pegged him at as far as what I thought would be, but like still basically worth it given how popular Spieth and Rahm were going to be. So like, I don't mind. Like, I think Henley is a guy that you could build around for sure. So I think that's a solid pick.
Fair enough. Pete, well, what are your critiques of some of my lineups? I'll run through here. I definitely favored bombers over everyone else, but I think that was obviously pretty chalky. Keegan was a guy that I thought would be lower owned. I was a little surprised that Palmer was only 3.6. I thought that he would be a nice value and be at least a little bit higher than that. So I wasn't expecting him to be such a contrarian pick. Obviously didn't make the cut, but where would you give me some pointers here?
I had exposure to all the guys you picked in the dog leg too. So I was all over all the guys that you picked. So I'm not the one to critiques. I guess in this format, we should have probably faded Finau given his ownership that we knew was going to be.
I mean, that's my number one. I'll kind of get into it in mine, but I think Finau was a clear fade in the same way that, like, isn't there kind of a rule in NFL that says, like, if there's ever a GPP fade, it's the low priced values because, like, they're just so volatile. Yeah. I think that's the case with Finau, where, like, I mean, we'll get into it in mine a little bit as far as like what I dealt with that, but I thought Finau was a clear fade, just given how volatile he is to begin with, and how super chalky he was going to be. So, I mean, you got to swap him out with someone else. I thought Keegan Bradley's a great pivot there, actually. I see you have them both in there, but I thought Bradley made a lot of sense just from a low ownership perspective. So I like that one a lot. Finau is a fade. I thought Rahm was debatably one. I had some of Rahm, so I don't hate it. But, like, I think Finau is the biggest, just, like, too chalky. You have to fade him. That's my biggest one.
Yeah, Rahm was the guy that I had the most of this weekend. He was the guy that I felt the most comfortable about as far as the top-end guys. I did have a lot of Adam Scott. Him and Ricky were the 2 high-priced guys. I didn't have much Stinson or Spieth. But, Pete, what were your thoughts on Scott? Was he a guy that I probably should have looked to fade right before the Masters?
I played Scott, so I don't know. I mean, I did everything wrong. I said that Finau was probably a fade, and I played Finau in 3 of the 3 I just looked at. So, I need to get better with this. I played my cash game team, my Thunderdome team, and another team. So I need to really think through the ownership going forward. But yeah, I think you did a much better job. I think I did the worst job when we look at my teams. And if you guys want me to, I can dive into that first.
So, yeah, I just kind of close out on Brian's thing. Like, I couldn't tell Scott and Fowler apart a whole lot. So I'm kind of indifferent in terms of, like, when and where. Like, those guys are interchangeable here. The only reason so you loaded up on Ryan Palmer too, right?
Yeah, I did. So I really liked him as a value play, and I thought he would be a little lower than some of the, like the Finaus of the world and stuff. So
I thought it'd be lower. Like, the only reason that I would have faded him is, like, I actually thought his ownership would be higher in, like, the 89% range. Knowing what I know now, it's still a pretty good pick. Like, I could have just as easily for that price, like. Yeah, it's pretty good. I could have talked myself into some other loan guys instead. Like, Keegan Bradley just remains, like, if it came down to the 2 of them, I would strongly prefer Bradley over Palmer. But like, if you knew what that ownership was going to be, I think it's defensible.
Yeah. I mean, my strategy is to, this is something that Pete has mentioned before, even in some of our NBA live shows where, in a 3-entry max, you obviously don't want to necessarily just go your cash lineup, but you might want to pivot just away from like the super chalky guys. So you're still fairly optimal, but pivot just a little bit down. So I did, try to like stay at least pretty chalky just because I thought those guys were really good plays, and then pivot to, like one guy. So Luke List was a guy, because I really did think Palmer was going to be highly owned, but Pete, is that sort of your thoughts as well in the Eagle? Just sort of still fairly optimal.
I should have done that. I mean, the big things that helped me in the dog leg is I went heavy on Luke List and Hudson Swafford, who I thought were like the clear nut pivots, and I didn't do that at all in the Eagle. I have Chalk City and just total donks. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Pete, I'll let you share your screen, and then you can sort of talk about yours here.
Okay. Well, I guess when you have to kill your screen sharing before I start it up.
Cool. All right.
So hopefully you guys can see this now on your end. Here's my 3 teams, 2 kind of right there bubbling, and then a really bad team. So we'll start with the bad team. Patrick Reed, Rahm, Mickelson, Horschel, Finau, and Cabrera Bello. Chalk Central, some bad plays, Cabrera Bello in particular, Mickelson, Chalk Central, Rahm, Reed. I mean, really no leverage here with the exception of Horschel. Next team here, which I believe this was my no, this was not a cash game team. I think this was my Thunderdome team that did end up cashing. This was my Thunderdome team. I pivoted to get Stenson, who I thought was ended up being lower owned. He was 50% owned in the Thunderdome, so just stupid on my end.
I swear the Thunderdome is just like out leveling itself.
Oh, everything is leveling itself. It's crazy. Yeah. So I leveled myself there. I did have Henley on 2 out of the 3 teams. I went Finau on 3 of the 3. Those were cash game guys that I wanted exposure to. So this was the team. Don't feel really great about this team either. Then finally right here, I rolled this in a lot of cash. I went Cabrera Bello, Finau, Henley, Mickelson, Reed, and Rose. Basically a balanced lineup here. I did have 5 of 6 make the cut, but you can see this is just straight chalk. This is my cash game team. So a lot to critique here. No pivots, no stances, all the chalk. And Cabrera Bello, for whatever reason I got on him, I don't think that was a very good pick. He didn't rank as high in a lot of the stuff I was doing, but I got swayed to him based on line movement for some cash games. Colin, I'm sure you have a lot to critique here.
So Cabrera Bello, the biggest reason I don't like it is because of ownership. Mm-hmm. I thought he was going to be incredibly high owned at that price. He just was a popular guy in general. And kind of in a similar note, Patrick Reed is a guy who got touted, and everyone's like, I can't believe that he's 7,700.
Including me, I said that.
The whole and I think I even said last week, like, I get why he's that price, and I agree with it. Not playing right now, and I don't mind fading him. I think people are just kind of still stuck on the name brand as Patrick Reed, Ryder Cup hero.
Yeah, I faded him in the Thunderdome and faded him in general. I just rolled him on the cash game team, and then for whatever reason, this team got a second one, and Reed was a bad play.
I hate him in all formats. So like Rafa and Reed is in all formats. I don't think, and like I mean Phil, I don't think he played any in the dog leg, right? Because like that's just going to be one of the.
I faded him. I just did a much better job with the dog leg. I did. I don't think I straight faded him, but I had him low owned. I might have faded him. Let me actually check that.
So other than that, I think everything's pretty good. I thought like Rose and Fowler were really, and like even Scott were really close to one another. I know you rolled, I mean, did you have them in pretty much equal exposure in the dog leg? Because I had a really tough time telling them apart.
Yeah, let me see here if I can actually, maybe I can't. Well, Colin, you can share your screen. I'll stop sharing my screen, and then we can come back and look at my ownerships for the dog leg. Yeah, which I actually think I did a pretty good job of.
So I thought it was interesting, Colin, while you go ahead and do that. Pete, you had Russell Henley and Phil Mickelson. Those guys were really close in price point, and it actually came down to me a lot in lineups where I chose Henley as my pivot over Phil just because I thought he would be lower owned, and he was, but. You said that you rostered him in cash, so I'm curious your thought. Do you think he was just a better cash play, even though he ended up being lower owned? You just liked him outright better?
Yeah, I liked Henley outright better for the course history angle. And I actually do have my My screen, so Colin, I can actually go back to this real quick if you don't mind. I'll go to my exposures just real quick, which I think are better, but still not great. I'm looking here. I had Cabrera high, and I did fade. No, I had Mickelson low. I had to keep knocking him down because of the models. But if we go here, you see my ownership. So I went Finau at the chalk, which was a mistake looking back. I just loved him so much at the price. I thought there was a chance he might not be as heavily owned. That's a mistake right there. Cabrera, mistake. Scott, Rose, I both like, but I don't mind that given kind of the roster construction I want. But then I had Henley at 39, which is good. I don't mind Glover at 37. Reifers I knew was going to be a really low-owned guy. Then I went Swafford, Palmer, Horschel, Howell, Vegas, all of which I thought were going to be some nice pivots here. Patrick Reed, big miss there. I think Colin hit on that. That was probably my biggest mistake. That and Finau. Fowler, List, Stenson, Rahm, Mickelson, O'Hare, Holmes, and Spieth at 6%. So I think these percentages are good, not A+. Just was fortunate that it worked out. But, yeah, Colin, what are your thoughts on those?
So the one that I have the most objection to that you still think is okay, and it's kind of schmucky because it was in your winning dogleg lineup, was Howell. I thought he was going to be around 20%. And just not great value. I could pick a lot of people around him for so many other different reasons.
What did he end up going owned? Do you remember?
What was he? If he's over 20%, I mean, if he's around 20%, then like I don't like that. But like,
yeah, I'll try to find out what he.
Yeah, it was something like that. But I mean, like going in, I thought he'd be around 20%, and just like 20% at middling value.
And the dogleg results are relevant with him on. I mean, he was by far the worst golfer.
Howell was 13-9 and the dogleg.
Yeah, I kind of thought that was
not too bad. Like, yeah, but even if it's still down there, like
it's not a great play.
We'll get into it in mine. Like, I would have strongly preferred Lucas Glover.
I played a lot of Lucas Glover though.
Yeah, I mean, like all else being equal, like I think, like if we're doing a pick three here, like if we're just doing these three and you only had three lineups, you would have picked Glover over Howell.
Yeah, I wanted a lot of teams that were balanced. I wanted to fade Spieth and even Rahm. I went with like the balanced approach, so I needed a lot of those guys in that range, which it worked out well. Like Scott, Rose, Henley were on a ton of teams. And I mixed in Swafford and List, which that was the key, was those two guys. Yeah. That's really what it comes down to. But if I could go back and not even being results oriented, I would knock down Finau and Cabrera just for the ownership. I still think having some exposure to them is fine. And like really tried to bump up some combination of Reifers or Swafford or Palmer, even Vegas. I think those are the guys in the list that made a lot of sense given where they ended up. So yeah. Let's look at these sexy three cashes right here. Where Colin gets a massive leaderboard.
That's a whole $20 right there. What does this thing pay out for $400? I forget. Like, what is that? We're gonna have to. I mean, we're gonna be keeping track of this.
$20. Wow.
Oh, look at that! Look at that! Just me eating from this trough right here. I mean, I am massively ahead to start.
Just spanking it.
Just like crushing it. So for this three, I built everything around three guys. Lucas Glover was one of them. And it didn't work out, but I just thought he was a great fit. And I'm wondering if like it was like I had basically I thought Lucas Glover was going to go for 12% and Swafford less equity, but like down for 4%. That's one where I'm maybe kicking myself the most. I know Glover's still defensible, but I'm wondering from an ownership perspective.
Glover had bad course history is the only thing that made me a little hesitant. I still pulled the trigger. The one thing we all hit on, I think, is Horschel. I feel good. I had 31% in the dog leg, and you hit him here as well.
Yeah,
and I think we got him a good ownership.
The guys that I had in all three of my lineups were Glover, Horschel, who I don't feel bad about, and then Stuart Sink, who I mentioned on the pod. That's me living my pivot where, like, he's right there, same price as Finau. And he was 4% owned versus Finau's 32.
Yeah, it has to be good.
That's the power of leverage right there. And Finau was inches away from missing the cut because it was touch and go for a while. If he missed the cut, the leverage would have been even compounded. Just as far as like a simple ratio of like 32 to 4.5 or something like 7-8x leverage. Like it's tough to quantify exactly how much that means, but like that's just a huge amount. So Like, no.
Clearly enough where Sink was way a better play than Finau.
Yeah, I think from ownership alone, like Finau had better odds to win for sure. And so, like, if you want to go pure, like
I meant to have Sink in my dog leg too, and that was the first thing I ever did when Sink started off. I was like, oh, what percent do I have Sink? Like 30? And then I went and checked, I had 0 of him. So that was my one mistake.
yeah,
Just go through the line. And that's critical too with your process. I think making sure you identify guys and understanding that you have them. So
yeah, I think So it was Sink, Glover, and Horschel who are kind of my 3 core, and then everyone else I kind of sprinkled around that. I didn't mind Rahm. The only reason, I mean, I knew he'd be chalky, but I've basically accepted that, like, if you want top end guys, like, you have to accept a certain amount of chalk. I thought Rahm might be rating a little bit higher than in my models because match play wasn't factored in, and I knew on a fit at speed, so he was kind of like the next logical guy. Like, once you build around,
let's see your second and third team, buddy.
Yeah. So, well, who else did I have over here? I had some of, like, it was more Rahm, more List. Berger was up there for sure. I liked him a lot. Like, once you settle around a core of Sink, Glover, and Horschel, like, you kind of have to spend up at that point. Otherwise, you're leaving too much money on the table.
Yep.
Maybe, like, if I had swapped out Glover for Swafford, I would have needed to even spend even more. So, like, by that metric, like, you just accept a certain amount of chalk. So that's why I knew Rahm was going to be chalky, but like, I saw those ownership numbers everywhere else here, and I was super happy as far as just like seeing them all.
Great teams.
That's all that I wanted to do. And the third one, Adams, this is another case where it's like you start with a 3. Russell Henley was just one of those, like, I don't mind having like 2/3 exposure to him just because, like, he's chalk with great value.
Right.
Berger in the same boat. And Adam Scott was kind of like my leftover. Like,
how much did you leave on the table on this one, buddy? This team had to leave some money on the table.
It wasn't that much. I mean, this adds to, like, I mean, I never leave more. It's like, it's 500 tops.
Yeah, I guess because you don't have anyone. Who's your cheapest guy there? Sink?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's
just
where
very
it
balanced.
is. Very balanced.
Yeah, that's the balance approach right there. I mean, Scott was like basically like that's how much I could spend it because I couldn't afford. If I could have taken Rose, I would have, but I couldn't afford him. So it's like, who else do you want that? I like Scott over JB Holmes a lot more for sure. So that was just kind of like my leftover. But that's kind of one of my like everybody talks about forming their core for a lot of different reasons, and like I think most people settle on a core because they think that the guys will do well. I think that may be a mistake in GPPs, and you can just as easily form a core around like the nexus of how well they think you'll do versus ownership. Like with Sink, I thought he would do decently well, but I also knew that he was just going to be sub 5% owned. So he's part of my core. Pete, do you ever take that approach as far as like forming a low ownership core for like a top heavy payout structure?
Yeah, no, I think that makes so much sense. I love your teams, and obviously you had the best results, but you definitely had the best teams too. I thought Brian did a good job, and I thought I did a really poor job in the Eagle. But it is what it is. We got to move on. And yeah, I definitely think you made a good choice there going with the low owned core that were a strong pivots as well, not just low owned, just good pivots.
The only one I'm kicking myself on is Swafford, because Swafford that was a course history too. It could have been Swafford or Glover and maybe change things at the margins. But.
Yeah, that was going to be my question for you. Is everything you argued for Glover being that low owned pivot away from who was it? Like your low owned pivot away from like Finau? Was that it?
Yeah, Sink away from Finau.
Yeah, or whatever. I thought Swafford was the pivot instead of Glover, so that's what I was curious about.
Well, no, so you thought Glover or Swafford was a pivot from Glover? Like, I just didn't think Glover was a pivot worthy.
No, I'm sorry. For you over Howell, you went Glover as a pivot away from Howell, and I thought Swafford was a pivot away from Howell. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so that's like both of those were acceptable pivots, right? Swafford, you take if you want low ownership.
Yeah, so I think you hedge that spot there. Yeah, I think you go 2/3 one guy and 1/3 the other. That's what I did. I went 37% Glover, 35% Swafford. I think you take a position on both.
If there's like 100 lineup type of thing, like that's where you just split the difference and like just like go 50-50.
Even 3 if you want. I mean, just go 2/3, 1/3. Because you have like the same kind of core. I mean, it's just like, yeah, I think there's merit. But I don't hate going all in on 3 guys either on a 3 max. I think just being all in makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think Swafford and Glover were really close to one another in terms of like the equity versus ownership nexus. Like it's I think I'm being a little results oriented, splitting the difference between the two. But like I think what will provide a greater answer for that is kind of like how much does like jumping down from like 18 to a 12 versus a 12 to a 4 get you in leverage? Because I don't necessarily think it's linear. And I think people are still, no one has a right answer for that except for the people sitting in secret computer algorithms. So I'm really looking forward to clarifying that answer, like once we get some better lineup data.
Yes, sir.
Last question I have for you guys. I ended up with really almost no Patrick Reed on DraftKings. I had a little bit on FanDuel because I thought his ownership would be lower. But he was a guy that I'd struggle with all week just because his long-term talent was probably better than what his salary was. And like I get your point, Colin, that 7-7 is probably a fair price considering what he's been. But he was just an example of a guy who was going to have high ownership because of that talent discrepancy, but just really like sucks at playing. So I ended up I thought because of that, if he's going to be high ownership, and I didn't really feel confident if he was a fade, but I could also see that like it worked out for me, but I'm a little unsure of whether my process was correct on that one.
He was a fade. I screwed it up. Colin has
yes,
Colin
it was just
100%.
Yeah, like it's
fade.
a clear cut for me.
100% conviction fade.
So like that's, I mean, the question of like pedigree versus like his actual form is I mean, it's a legitimate one in the abstract.
Because like in other sports, sports, you want to buy low on guys, but golf maybe not.
No, because like it absolutely not. Because like it's it's forward thinking pricing, right? It's like reflective, it's predictive, and not just like this like auto aggressive like what have the last done in the last 10. In terms of which one would I have to guess is exploitable? Like, oh, he has a good pedigree, so buy low, versus like everyone else thinks that and his ownership is going to be high, but they can't, like, they're looking at the name brand only and can't recognize that like he sucks right now.
Yeah, like Jason Day is the great example here.
Yeah, I think the latter is far more exploitable in terms of like, oh, like people can't get if you know that people can't get off a name, then that's when you just want to like auto fade and let them sink the money in. Jason Day is another, like, he, especially for the Masters this week, he's a more interesting case because it's like there's a question of bounce back and like how much. I mean, like I actually don't know Reed's fade versus, but like, and also people did get off day decently fast, I think. Yeah. So there's not as much advantage there. I mean, you just fade him like your normal like process is. Yeah. Like, but yeah, I think Reed was a clear fade.
Yeah, and Pete, that was not trying to be a sub tweet or whatever at you.
No sub tweet. No, I screwed that up. I was off and then on him at the end.
But he was top 10 in volatility rating on ownership dashboard, so like he was like a sharp play by that standard. So
yeah, a lot of people
out quickly after I saw that.
Yeah, it was a screw up.
Interesting.
That's all there is to it.
Okay. All right. Well, we will end it there. Thank you guys for watching. We will do these as much as we can. We'll probably do one for the Masters just because it's the Masters. So that'll be fun. We'll be back next week. But we'll do these every once in a while. I think they're useful for us three specifically, but also hopefully you guys got something out of it, just us talking about our process and all that. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.